All right, creation versus evolution. This is actually a study that we took from a junior high youth group that we did years ago, and it's been expanded and put a little more guts into it. We have, everybody's teaching evolution as if it was a fact when it was actually proven to be impossible decades ago. And we'll get into some of the heavy science next week. So we're going to do just a global run through this week and some history on Darwin. One of the biggest misunderstandings is that this is a science versus scripture thing. Not even close to being the case. And you got to think about it this way. God created science along with the physical universe. Man didn't invent science. God created it. It explains what's going on. Excluding miracles, good science should never contradict good theology. So the problem here is not science versus theology. It's good science versus good theology. The Bible must always be the measure of truth, but we need to be sure that we're properly interpreting it and it's supported by other scripture. So this is another problem, is that a couple of scriptures get misinterpreted and you start running down the wrong road and you end up in a place that you shouldn't be. So the real problem is lies versus truth. And Satan is the father of lies, and you get these agendas in the world that promote certain lies, and that they just, once they set their hooks, they're almost impossible. Once a lie gets put in the textbook, it's almost impossible to get it removed. It takes decades, if ever. So lies versus truth is the real issue here. So there's two distinct theological / scientific issues here. One is the origin of life, creation versus evolution, and the other one is the age of the earth and the universe. Is it 6,000 years old or is it 14.5 billion years old? We're going to be focusing on the left-hand side. We're doing the origin of life, creation versus evolution. The age of the universe is a heavy thing. You need to get into some Hebrew, you need to get into Greek, you need to get into Old and New Testament verses, into the prophets. There's a lot going on there. So I'm just going to touch on it a little bit in a couple of slides, but we're going to focus on the creation versus evolution side of this. So there are three main views on how life originated. Excuse me. The biblical view, God created everything. Evolutionary view, everything was just a big accident. And then there are these hybrid views that mix some sort of God with evolution, with works, with other things. And we'll go through a few different hybrid views and that are the primary ones that you've all heard of. So the biblical view, creation, the one that we need to anchor ourselves to, is there is a perfect and powerful God. Amen. He created the heaven and the earth, or the universe. He created all current life forms in 6 24-hour days. And the reason that we know they're 24-hour days is at the end of each day it says, so the evening and the morning were the first day. Also in Exodus, there's a very clear statement that in 6 days God did create the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested. So it's very clear there's 6 literal days. There's another thing, the day-age theory, that people link it to the verse, and I think it's in 2 Peter, that with the Lord 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is as 1,000 years. And all that's saying is don't put God in a box. And adding another 6,000 years to this wouldn't change much. 6,000 versus 12,000, that's not changing anything. So they're literal 24-hour days, and it's very clearly stated in Scripture. And since the fall of Adam and Eve, all living things have become weaker and more corrupt, and we continue to become weaker and more corrupt as time goes on. The evolutionary view. There is no God. The universe and all of the matter in it suddenly appeared for no reason. By random chance, complex chemicals were formed, and when they were electrified, life suddenly appeared. Poof. This life form slowly evolved in tiny increments to all of the different life forms we know today. And total opposite, everything is continuing to evolve to a superior form, and eventually will become extremely intelligent and powerful like gods. So it's the complete opposite of what the Bible tells us. And it's foolishness, but when people don't have the light of Jesus and the truth, you can't expect much. So, all right, so a hybrid evolutionary view, and this is the religious one, and this is a typical one, that there is a God of some sort. He created the universe. He sat back and allowed evolution to happen, and at a certain point he chose humans and gave them a soul. This particular version, I believed for a long time, before I was saved, because I felt that everything was old, but I always believed in God, so I tried to mix it, and this was a good one because it kind of fits. You got it all. I got it all figured out. That's not any good. There's no good. There's no evolution. It's creation. So this one, a lot of people. I know a lot of my friends from the past fell into this bucket as well. Other religious hybrid evolutionary views. So Darwin is not the first to promote evolution, not even close to the first. All of the false religions promote some sort of evolution. This includes Egyptians, Sumerians, Babylonians, Mormons, Hindus, Buddhists, and Roman Catholics, and I'll get into that in a second. This form of evolution is tied to death, reincarnation, and works needed to evolve to a level acceptable to be allowed into heaven. Let me just touch on the Mormons. The Mormons believe that you have to do works, that God worked his way up to where he is, that there are actually hundreds, if not thousands, of gods, and depending on how much work they did when they were alive, depends on what level they got to after they died. So there is an ultimate Mormon God somewhere who's the hardest working man in the universe. Foolishness. The Roman Catholics, this is a strange one. Their purgatory is a form of evolution. You die, and then you need to work your way up. You need to better yourself in purgatory. So the Roman Catholic purgatory is a form of evolution, that you're working your way up to become an acceptable, superior being. And it's strange, because a lot of people don't tie the two together, but I feel that that's a valid way to look at what they have. The Egyptians had the Book of the Dead. It was actually this very complex set of things that they needed to do, that once they died, they had to do these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of steps in order to work their way through the land of the dead to get to the ultimate power on the other end, and that they could be tricked by serpents, and they could be tricked by demons, and so they had to know all these things to get through the land of the dead and get to the end of their journey. So that's a form of, very similar to the Roman Catholic purgatory, what the Egyptians had. Some interesting stuff. And again, all foolishness. Okay, and this is the latest one, and it's not totally new. It's been around for a long time, the alien hybrid view. That there are super evolved aliens, some sort of gods, that they go around and they seed planets with their DNA in order to promote life. This blends aliens, evolution, and technology together to form gods. This is also known as the Raelian movement, and it teaches that life on Earth was scientifically created by a species of extraterrestrials called Elohim, which is another name for God in the Bible. So it's blasphemous at best, and it's foolishness. But the story of Prometheus is here. We got the Greek and Roman gods. We have a whole bunch of things going on here. And especially the technology that's brought into play, that they have spaceships, that it's got aliens, that they have the power and the knowledge to move throughout the universe. This is very close to the Mormons as well, that their God has earned himself all this knowledge and power, and he can travel throughout the universe. So the Mormons are very close to this, but they don't show it in the same technological way. I actually feel that there's something, when the Antichrist comes, after the rapture occurs and the church is removed, and the Antichrist comes to power, there's going to be a lie that's told to everybody. And God will send a delusion so that everyone believes this lie. And I feel that it's going to have something to do with aliens and technology. It's going to explain the rapture. Where did all those millions of people go? And I have a feeling it's going to have something to do with aliens. So they've really ramped up the alien agenda over the last 10 or 15 years, and there's a lot going on with the alien stuff. So just interesting. Excuse me. Okay, so the 6 days of creation and reformation. The Genesis, there is so much going on in the book of Genesis. You need to get into Hebrew, into the specific words, into specific definitions. You need to look at old Masoretic texts and how they brought things forward in the book. There is nothing that's a straightforward read about the book of Genesis. You could read through the book of Genesis 90 times and find something new every time. I just want to go through the 6 days of creation here to just show you that it's not all creation, and that there's all kinds of things going on here. And we'll move on, because this is just a little heavy, and it's not really where we're going tonight. So Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 has to do with the age of the universe, and we're not going to touch that. 1:3 is when God first spoke. So he didn't speak in 1:1 and 1:2, but he first spoke in Genesis 1:3. And God said, day one, he allowed light to exist, Haya. He did not create light. Light already existed. He allowed it to come into the area. So something happened there. It's much more than we get. It's not like and it had nothing to do with the sun at this point. That comes later. So this has to do with darkness and light. And the darkness that's mentioned before this is the same darkness that's mentioned in the Egyptian plagues. It's a darkness that can be felt, that the people were in darkness and they could feel the darkness. So there's something much deeper and much more meaningful going on here with the light and the darkness. Day two, he made the firmament to divide the waters above the firmament, the waters below the firmament. The Hebrew word asa, and that is to form something from existing materials. So this isn't a creation from nothing at this point. Things already existed, and he formed them. He moved them around, and he made the firmament to divide the waters. Something very interesting too here is that every single day, at the end of the day, God said, and it was good, except for day two. And you read it, it'll blow your mind. You don't catch that. Day two, he did not say it was good. And the belief is, first of all, because that firmament divided heaven from the physical universe. He literally cut off heaven from the physical universe. So it was not a good thing that he had to do that. And the second reason that it's not that he didn't say it was good is because Satan is the prince of the power of the air. And as soon as that firmament was put in place, the air was allowed to form around the earth, an envelope, and the demons and Satan possibly inhabited it, came back at that time into the air, and that was not good either. So there's something going on here that you can only speculate. I don't doubt there's some scriptures that can support certain things stronger, but just to plant some seeds and let you know there's a lot going on here. Excuse me. Day three, he gathered water together. So now there's water above and water below. He gathered the water together on the earth, and he brought forth plant life according to its kind. So the way that it talks about bringing forth the plant life is as if the seeds, its kind, were already there in some fashion. Very complex Hebrew structures going on here. According to its kind, and we'll get into the according to its kind in a little bit. Day 4, he made the sun, the moon, and the stars. So again, this is asa. This is out of existing materials. So all these things, the materials existed, but he had to form them. The sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, if we go back to that day-age theory with the people that think that each day is 1,000 years or an extended period of time, he made the plant life on day 3, so it would have been 1,000 years or so until the sun was made, so the plant life would have died. It didn't have sun. So there's things here that kind of support things and shut other things down. Day 5, he created bara. This is a very special Hebrew word. This creation is to make something appear out of nothing. So he created the water creatures and the air creatures according to their kind. But this was a special creation. This didn't use existing materials. This came from nowhere, and it's believed it's because of the life that was involved with this. Day 6, he made insects, cattle, and earthly beasts. The difference between cattle and the earthly beasts are the cattle are the things that people can use easily, cows, goats, pigs, things like that. Earthly beasts are the other things like lions, tigers, bears, etc. So there is a difference in the Hebrew. But these were made asa from existing materials, again, according to kind. And then mankind, he did both. He created and formed. He did both bara and asa to mankind. And he didn't do it according to their kind or our kind. He did it according to God's image. So very special things going on each day here. And you could do an hour-long study on every single day. But the bottom line is, and why were we created and formed? The belief is first of all, that he formed us from the ground. He used the ground to form us, and he created our souls. So we're the only special thing that was both created and formed. So very interesting stuff that's going on here. It's not a simple read. Okay, so the according to its kind. This is very important with the evolution and genetics thing. The Hebrew word used for kind is mean, which denotes a species. So they were made according to their species. And this defines the uncrossable genetic lines. It's impossible for two kinds or two species to have valid and sustainable offspring. Now, this is one of the biggest examples. When a horse is crossed with a donkey, it makes a mule. It must have taken somebody hours to get that picture lined up down there in the corner. I could get a kick out of that. The mule is always infertile and cannot breed. So it's a one-shot deal. This is similar with plants. A lot of people may know orchids and special plants that are mixed bred, that it's a one-shot deal. That orchid won't drop a seed and have another orchid come from it. So a very special thing that nothing crosses the genetic lines. Now, whether there's some crazy stuff going on in some lab underground somewhere that's fiddling around with this stuff, I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't doubt that anything we can imagine is taking place somewhere that's not supposed to be done. That's a different story, but naturally nothing can cross these lines. Okay, so here we put on our science hat. So it's the whole science side of this thing is a fact versus an observation. That's the whole key to the scientific side of this, is whether something's a fact or whether it's an observation. So a fact is something that is known and it's always true. 2 + 2 is 4, the sun is bigger than the earth, etc., etc. An observation is anything that's not a fact. When something is not a fact, it can be characterized through the use of the scientific method. So some of us may remember this, some of our hair may be getting too gray to remember this, but we probably all learned about the scientific method in school. So this consists of observation, measurement, and experimentation used to support or refute an original observation. So that's it in a nutshell. 4 parts to it. You observe something, you form a hypothesis, you keep observing and doing measurements and experimentation. If it stays true long enough, it becomes a theory. You keep observing, measuring, and doing experimentation. If it continues to stay true, it eventually becomes a law. So that's the order that the scientific method uses. So the theory of evolution, which is also called natural selection, is a gradual process in which something changes into a different and more complex form by many slight modifications over a long period of time. Mainly attributed to Charles Darwin, but it actually goes back much further to the Egyptians and Babylonians. Now, if you think about this, and this will boggle your mind, because the theory of evolution, if you think about what we're talking about here, observation, experimentation, how nobody's ever observed evolution take place. So there's something missing here. There's no observation. Nobody's ever watched a fish grow legs and climb up onto the shore. Nobody's ever seen a one-celled organism turn into something more that you can't observe. So the theory of evolution should never have even fallen into this whole science category. It's not even a valid way to categorize it. It's speculation and opinion. It is not observation. It does not fit the scientific method. So it may have started off at observation, and an intelligent person should have said, wait, Darwin, no, you didn't observe anything. That's just your opinion, and that's speculation. So no one's ever observed anything here, so there's a serious flaw right off the bat with this. So let's look at Darwin, and you know, my point, I guess, with that is that these things are more agenda-driven than fact-driven and science-driven, that these are satanic agendas. These are things that are put out there to confuse people, to divide people. So there's a lot more going on here than just science and people that think that they know everything. So who was Charles Darwin? Born February 12, 1809 in Shrewsbury, England. Died April 19, 82, 73 years old. His background. His father was an extremely wealthy and famous doctor, so money is involved here. The very famous, wealthy person. His family was nonconformist Unitarian, so they believed in a God of some sort, but they were open to anything that made sense. Whatever, if it seems to make sense today, that's fair game. He was baptized and went to a boarding school at the Church of England. You notice it doesn't say he became a Christian and was baptized. It's more of a Roman Catholic. All of England has perverse church doctrinal issues. I mean, yes, there are Christians there and there are pockets of good churches, but for the majority of English and European churches, there are serious doctrinal problems. Excuse me. So Darwin had planned on becoming a doctor to follow in his father's footsteps at one point, and then an Anglican clergyman, and he never completed either of those. He attended Christ College in Cambridge from 1828 to 1831, and he got a BA without honors. He was no genius. And Christ College had perverse views on God and Jesus, and they still do today. It still exists today, and they still have serious problems. Very close to Roman Catholicism and major legalism issues as well. So Darwin and religion. While he was at Cambridge University, he became close friends with many powerful and influential men, and he began questioning the literalness of the Bible. He became interested in science, and he was greatly influenced by John Henslow, who was his botany professor, and John Herschel. And we'll touch on him in a second here. But this is typical things. The colleges in this country are the same. Especially the more money you pay, the worse the college is. It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. The Ivy League colleges, they were all founded as Christian colleges, and as time went by, they were purchased and bought and turned into horrible, heretical places. And it's crazy that the more people pay, the more garbage they have pumped into their brains, literally. And this was the beginning of Darwin's major turn from God and religion, was when he went to college. And these two men played a major role in that. John Herschel, the picture is worth 1,000 words. This was an evil, dangerous man. This was one of the key players in the background of Darwin. And you can tell by the black garb that he has on, and just by his looks that there's some real problems there. John Herschel, he was an English mathematician, astronomer, chemist, photographer, and inventor. Extremely perverted views of God and religion. He tried to find a natural explanation for everything, and he seemed to have a very specific agenda to disprove the existence of God. It was widely held that John Herschel was deep into the study of black magic and witchcraft, and he was a friend and supporter of Joseph von Utzschneider, and he was a known Illuminati member and a Satanist. Does anybody know here the Illuminati? You ever heard of that? That's another study for another time, but there's a lot going on in this world with the Federal Reserve System, the central banking systems, groups like the Illuminati, the CFR, the Foreign Relations Committees, the Club of Rome, Jesuits, all these groups that are working towards revelation and the mark of the beast and the whole 9 yards. But the Illuminati is a well-known group. Go on YouTube and look it up. We have videos on them as well on our website. But they are Illuminati means keepers of the light. They are the ones that try to hide truth from the masses. They're the ones with the agendas. They're the ones that put out the lies. They're the ones that support the homosexuality agenda, the abortion agendas, the changing our schools so that our kids are barely taught anything. The Illuminati's behind all of these agendas, and it's a scary group. So this man was behind the scenes using Darwin, and in my opinion, and these things are impossible to prove, this is speculation in my opinion, that Darwin was just a pawn in this. He was the right person in the right place at the right time, and John Henslow and Herschel used him to accomplish what they needed to accomplish. So John Herschel, this man further, he was tied to what was called the Great Moon Hoax. And this was a fictitious story that he had printed in 1835 that he actually made up another level of lie, and he said that this was a reprint from the Edinburgh Journal of Science, which was a fake publisher. They didn't even exist. So he was able to get this story published by saying that he had already had it published in another paper in a science journal, and you need to reprint this. What this story was that it reported that he used a powerful telescope and he saw life on the moon that included fantastic animals like unicorns, beavers that stood on two legs, and furry-winged humanoids resembling bats. And this was a serious thing. I mean, people believed this for quite a period of time until it was proven to be a hoax. And again, when something like this gets printed, it takes a long time for people to be able to get the documents, look into it, research it, and to prove it wrong. So, literally hundreds of thousands of people believed this for a long period of time before people were able to disprove it and show that it was a hoax. Okay, so Darwin and the HMS Beagle, the boat that he went on his big journey on, Based on a recommendation from Darwin's professor, John Henslow, that's the other guy, that was his botany professor, Captain Robert Fitzroy invited Darwin along to investigate geology and collect specimens. So that's Fitzroy in the lower left there. The HMS Beagle embarked on a 5-year journey in December of 1831. Unbelievable journey. I mean, talk about a cruise. Give me a break. So it started at Plymouth, worked its way down and around, and it went around the whole world. I mean, that's just must have been incredible. So 5-year journey, and they hit all the major places at the time. All right, Darwin's return. So by the time the Beagle returned in 1836, he was already a celebrity with the scientific circles. So what had happened is his former professor, John Henslow, the man that gave him the recommendation, had been back in England, and he'd been receiving letters that Darwin was sending back, and he was reading them to the scientific circles and building up Darwin and what an incredible guy he is. So by the time he returned, he was a hero. And Darwin began to organize his collections and collaborate with other scientists, and he started to write his book. So shortly after this, he married Emma Wedgwood, which was his first cousin, and this was in 1839. And now we're going to touch on a whole nother set of things here that you don't usually hear about Darwin that's pretty interesting. Eugenics. Darwin's family and many other families, just like the king and the queen and the royal families do to a point today, but they used to do it much heavier, do purposeful inbreeding in order to create a stronger genetic line. So this was taking place, and Darwin's family was part of it. This was discovered around the turn of the century, around 1900, maybe a little bit later than that. But it was discovered that the Darwins, along with the Wedgwood and Galton families, practiced purposeful eugenics. So these are 3 very rich families that were purposely inbreeding with each other because they felt that they were superior to the people around them. Excuse me. Francis Galton, who's Charles Darwin's half-cousin, he was really the developer of this whole theory. It's not a theory, it's a whole process. It's a lifestyle. And he documented it, and he actually wrote a book on this. This has huge implications, and it obviously supports an elitist agenda. It goes back many generations, and so a gentleman researched it, and he was able to find that they had been doing this for hundreds of years. And Wedgwood is the family that you might have heard, and it's the China. It's the people, the dishware. So they're the rich Wedgwood family. So very interesting stuff. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes here than you're typically aware of. So Darwin had 10 children, and Emma, Charles Darwin and Emma, his wife, had 10 children. Annie died at the age of 10, so that's Annie. And Annie's death devastated Charles Darwin. He was always concerned her death was due to inbreeding with his first cousin Emma. So he knew there was something not right here. And it just tore his life apart. He never recovered from this. It devastated him. So this is his book, On the Origin of Species. That's the original version right there. So September 1838, Darwin first conceived his theory of natural selection. How he conceived it, nobody knows. Obviously, he wasn't the first, but I don't doubt there were people in the background giving him little pushes on which way to go with this thing. After much work and many health issues, the book was published and went on sale in 1859. This book, in theory, is entirely speculation based on opinion. There's nothing scientific about it. And it's the foundation for the theory of evolution we refer to today. So this is interesting, and this, I said it before and I'll say it again. I have a feeling Charles Darwin's going to be in heaven, and I may be totally off base saying that, but I really have a feeling that he was just a pawn, he was a dupe, that he struggled his whole life with God and this whole thing, and the statements that he made in his book, and there are a good half dozen very strong statements that he made that are like a red flag that says, if you can show this, then my theory is garbage. And it just seemed almost as if he knew that he was cornered, and he didn't have his heart into this book completely, and he wanted to let people know that if you can just show these things, then you can take and burn this book, it's worthless. And he did that at least 6 times. So this is one thing that he started right off in the introduction to the book. He stated that he had very few facts to support his general conclusions, but he hoped to someday find these facts in order to prove his theory true. So it's pretty unique to have someone say that right in the beginning of their book. And this is the extraction. I can here give only the general conclusions at which I have arrived, with a few facts and illustration, but which I hope in most cases will suffice. No one can feel more sensible than I do of the necessity of hereafter publishing in detail all the facts with references on which my conclusions have been grounded, and I hope in a future work to do this. So basically he's saying, I have no proof of any of this, but someday I hope to have. They're pretty kind of interesting. No proof, none of these supporting facts have ever been found, compiled, or published. This came later, and he made another statement here, which is very unfortunate. So it's clear by the following statement contained within Darwin's book that he once believed in God, but had changed his view. So he said, the view which most naturalists entertain, and which I formerly entertained, namely, that each species had been independently created, is erroneous. So at one point he believed in creation, and then he changed his mind and he didn't believe in it anymore. So it's unfortunate something happened like that. All right, so the theory has been proven false. Evolutionists have never found, compiled, or published any facts to advance the theory of evolution to a law. There have been many facts found since Darwin's time that disprove the theory of evolution, and we're going to get into that next week. We'll touch on several large things. And several of Darwin's conclusions have also been specifically proven to be incorrect. Some facts about evolution. All right, the study of evolution, or being an evolutionist, is not a form of science. Evolution is actually a form of religion that makes man into God, and that's interesting. I support that statement 100%, and it's funny because they won't allow you to teach Christianity in schools because it's religion. But they teach evolution, which is religion. It's making man into God. But they will never categorize evolution as a form of religion. So that's interesting. Evolutionary research is simply speculation based on opinions. Again, it has nothing to do with real science. Evolution is a devious contrivance of lies and truths in order to support a personal agenda. And I like this. It's similar to two drunks who try to come up with the most believable story about what to tell their wives when they arrive home 3 hours late. I mean, it really is that they're talking, well, what if she asks you this? And then he thinks about it for a while, and well, I can tell her this. And he's, that sounds pretty good. I can go along with, but what if she asks you this? Well, then I can tell her. So it's constantly coming up with some type of story to cover a valid question. That's evolution. Evolution is not a love of science, but a hatred of God. I mean, deep down inside, and you'd be probably hard-pressed to get a lot of evolutionists to admit it, but they just don't want to have anything to do with God and accountability or anything like that. Evolution is also extremely racist and prejudiced. It promotes the lie that blacks and aborigines are less evolved than whites. This was strongly promoted back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, that if you were black or an aborigine, that you were way down the evolutionary chain, which is outrageous racism. Totally wrong. We're all from Adam and Eve and then from Noah. So, and you don't hear that being taught in school today. So if you believe in evolution, that's one of the basics that they teach, is that blacks and aborigines are way down the evolutionary chain. So, foolishness. And that's it for this week. Anybody got comments or questions?